Thank you. We have 1 hour at our disposal, and it is a great pleasure for me and a big honor to chair this session, which is the third country session of this assembly, country session of Japan. The way we will organize the session is that we have, first of all, 3 distinguished speakers on the podium. And after the presentations, we will have a panel consisting of 6 representatives. And then we will open the floor for comments and questions. I won't take up too much time myself. Just one general comment on the Eastern and Far Eastern involvement in the Arctic agenda, which we have seen being renewed over the last decade or so. I think it's fair to say that the Arctic, being a sparsely populated area, looks at the Eastern and Far Eastern nations and superpowers, if I may say so, with different views. Most of us attach great expectations of the involvement of Japan, China, Korea in the Arctic agenda. The eastern part of the world, inhabited by most of the people of this earth, also holds big potentials for us, both as partners, but also as big markets holding a potential for the Arctic industries and holding potentials for enhancing the economies of the Arctic area. This session, this country session with Japan, I believe will not only focus on cooperation, but also look deep into the scientific contribution of Japan with respect to the development of Arctic science. So let me not waste more of your precious time and introduce the first speaker today, who is the ambassador in charge of the Arctic affairs from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, Mr. Suganuma, who is a graduate of University of Tokyo, and he is dealing with multilateral economy, and his previous post was as ambassador in Brunei for Japan. Please, Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours. Please welcome the ambassador.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Kleist. Your Excellency, Mr. President Grimson, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first of all express our deep appreciation for allowing us to make this presentation. The establishment of this forum is very timely, as people from diverse backgrounds interested in Arctic, government officials, researchers, business, can gather and exchange views across their fields. And I would like to pay my highest respect to Your Excellency, Mr. Grimson, the President of Iceland, for the foresight and untiring effort in bringing all of us here. And let me also thank Your Excellency, Mr. Kleist, for former Prime Minister of Greenland, for being the moderator for this session. The Arctic is now facing significant environmental changes caused by the advancing global warming. According to the fourth assessment report published in 2007 by the ICCP, during the 100 years of the 20th century, the average temperature rose by 0.74 degrees centigrade in the whole world, and more than 2 degrees centigrade in the Arctic. The change caused by global warming are not limited to the reduced Arctic sea ice, but at land, permafrost, ice sheets and glaciers are also melting. These changes have raised serious challenges for the international community, including Japan. They are extremely serious in the sense that they could impact not only the Arctic region, but also the entire global environment. For instance, scientists point out of a vicious circle of declining sea ice with high reflectance, resulting in increased absorption of solar heat, which leads to even greater reduction of sea ice. It is also indicated that the melting of ice and permafrost causes emission of methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, which leads to the acceleration of global warming, the so-called Arctic amplification phenomenon. Ocean acidification, which is the most evident in polar regions, is another problem that could affect the entire marine ecosystem. Japan has been a leading country in the field of scientific research of ocean acidification, which is with its detailed scientific observation. And the leading expert in this field, Professor Shirayama, Executive Director of Research, Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology, will give a presentation later on this topic. Having said that, not everything happening in the Arctic is problematic. A new shipping route between Asia and Europe is about to emerge along the northern coast of Russia due to declining Arctic sea ice. Exploitation of the vast reserve of energy resources presumed to lie in the Arctic, especially natural gas, is also becoming a possibility. Thus, environmental changes in the Arctic present international community with new economic opportunities too. However, it goes without saying that possible impacts on human activities over the vulnerable natural environment in the Arctic must be carefully examined if we are to make use of these opportunities. This observation reveals that though environmental changes are phenomena occurring within the geographical range of the Arctic, their impact reaches out to the entire world. To put it simply, the challenges and the opportunities surrounding the Arctic are both regional and global. We need to respond properly to the environmental changes in the Arctic with a full awareness of these two-sidedness. To this end, addressing the following two challenges is particularly important. First is to grasp, based upon scientific research, what is going on in the Arctic and its impact on the global environment in order to precisely predict further changes and take necessary measures to tackle negative impact. Second, we have to reach a common understanding on appropriate manners of economic use of the Arctic, including the measures for minimizing risks like unexpected accidents or damages to the environment. In addressing these challenges, we should naturally respect the centrality of regional states and Arctic indigenous peoples. Nevertheless, a wide range of international cooperation become essentials when we take into account their scale of impact as global issues. A prerequisite for promoting such international cooperation and discussions is to ensure that actions taken in the Arctic are based upon the rule of law. From this perspective, Japan welcomes that territorial disputes and maritime delimitation issues in the Arctic have been settled peacefully in accordance with the international law. Also, Japan maintains as a maritime state that the relevant international law, including the law of sea, the UNCLOS, needs to be applied to the seas around the world, including the Arctic Ocean, and that the principles of international law, including freedom of navigation, need to be respected therein. In the Arctic Ocean, being mostly an ice-covered area, an appropriate balance between such principles as freedom and safety of navigation and protection of marine environment needs to be achieved. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of its policy of proactive contribution to peace based on the principle of international cooperation, we plan to take necessary measures even more proactively in order to resolve global issues. We, to the best of our ability, are ready to contribute to the international efforts to address the two challenges that I mentioned earlier. As a neighbor of the Arctic region, Japan has a long history of scientific observation and research in the Arctic for more than 50 years. The fruits of this endeavor are not limited to our research on ocean acidification, which I mentioned. We also provide scientific analysis on ongoing environmental changes in the Arctic, utilizing, for example, Earth observation satellites with most advanced technologies such as Shizuku or GCOM-W, as shown in the slide. Thus, I'm convinced that Japan's scientific expertise will greatly contribute to the international community in elucidating ongoing changes in the Arctic environment and elaborating measures to be taken. Also, Japan is committed to utilizing its advanced science technology to the greatest extent possible with a view to minimizing risks involved with increased human activities in the Arctic and realizing its economic use in a way beneficial to the international community. Now, let me try to introduce some specific initiatives that Japan is planning. First, we must tackle global warming as an underlying cause of environmental change in the Arctic. 7 years ago, our Prime Minister Shinzo Abe proposed a goal of reducing global greenhouse gas emission by 50% by the year 2050. At the UN Climate Summit convened in New York this September, our Prime Minister reaffirmed this target and introduced Japan's new action with 3 key concepts, namely support for developing countries, technological innovation and diffusion, and contribution to the international framework. The key to achieve this ambitious goal is innovation. It requires sharing the best knowledge in the world and combining strengths of government, businesses, and academia. With this recognition, the Innovation for Cool Earth Forum, or ICEF, was established as an international forum to assemble global wisdom from business, public, and academic sector together. And the first conference was held in Tokyo on 8 October with some 800 participants from about 80 countries. We will host this forum every year. Through these initiatives, we would like to promote innovation in the energy and environmental field, thereby contribute to the solution of the problem of global climate change, including in the Arctic. Any attempt to consider measures for addressing environmental change in the Arctic would require first and foremost elucidation of relevant fact by scientific means. We need to understand analyze and predict how chemical substance with greenhouse effects, such as methane and black carbon effect, affects the warming of the Arctic. Japan has conducted various researches for unraveling facts on global warming. In high-latitude regions, including the Arctic, with the cooperation of the countries concerned, we are carrying out greenhouse gas observation by setting up observation points on the ground and using aircraft. There's no picture. We hope to strengthen international cooperation to conduct even more elaborate observation. We hope to enhance such efforts so as to clarify and predict more in detail the impact of Arctic environmental change on the global climate change. As for ocean acidification that I mentioned, Japan has been conducting researches on its ecological impacts by dispatching its own research vessel Mirai to the Arctic Ocean. For deeper understanding, more comprehensive research involving more observation points is needed. Therefore, Japan intends to further promote cooperation, joint research, especially with Arctic countries. We have also been conducting underwater survey on submarine topography, utilizing its autonomous underwater vehicle named Urashima. We consider it our next challenge to achieve a breakthrough innovation necessary for developing a new AUV which can conduct survey missions even under the harsh conditions of the Arctic Ocean. Economic activities in the Arctic, such as the operation of ships in the Arctic sea route and the exploitation of energy resources, are conducted under harsh natural environment. Such activities are more dangerous than those under normal conditions, and given that the natural environment in the Arctic is extremely vulnerable, it is imperative to prevent unexpected accident and to minimize risk to the environment. For example, for safe navigation in the Arctic or smooth exploitation of resources, a variety of information on underwater conditions like ebb and flow, ocean current, and submarine topography needs to be collected. However, with present technology, observation activity under ice-covered surface are not easy. The underwater technology that I mentioned earlier for studying marine ecology in the Arctic could eventually be used to gather such information. Establishment of a navigation system to help ships traveling in the Arctic is also one of our future challenges. While working on a research to improve prediction accuracy of Arctic sea ice distribution and weather conditions, Japan is advancing a project for developing an Arctic navigation system by integrating such prediction information with data gained from various Earth observation satellites. To pursue such ambitious goal, it is obvious that enhanced international collaboration and cooperation is required. We plan to establish a center for education and research in each Arctic state, including here in Iceland, for promoting researchers' exchange and developing international joint research programs. And in April next year, we will host the Arctic Science Summit Week in Toyama City, where the Arctic research institutions and researchers will gather from all around the world. We warmly welcome your participation to this commemorative event of the 25th anniversary of the International Arctic Science Committee. Moreover, Japan will feed back the outcomes gained from these scientific observation and research initiatives to the international community. We very much appreciate the kindest support from the Arctic state, which enabled us to participate in the Arctic Council as an observer in May last year. And in the wake of this, we will with our own expertise, we will be happy to make further contribution to the AC-related working group and task force. In order to address properly the challenges arising from the change in the Arctic environment on the one hand, and to make the most of emerging opportunities on the other, it is necessary for the international community to promote cooperation without falling into an exclusive and competitive relationship. As a responsible member of the international community and a state with long years of achievements in the Arctic observation and research, and proud of our advanced science and technology, Japan is committed to playing a proactive role in promoting international cooperation in relation to the Arctic. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I'm sure that we will all benefit from Japan's advanced knowledge in the field of Arctic science. As I said, we are in the Arctic Circle. We are very happy to host you and to facilitate such a session. Just one observation that it seems like almost every speaker here invites us to another conference. We might as well just stick together the rest of the year and go from place to place. Just a proposal. My next speaker on the list is Mr. Shirayama, who is the Executive Director of Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology. Mr. Shirayama is dealing with marine biology. He's also a graduate of University of Tokyo and also occupied at Seto Marine Biology Laboratory at the Kyoto University. Please, Mr. Shirayama, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Kleis, Mr. President, and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to introduce about the Japanese scientific activities in the Arctic regions. My presentation is rather concentrated about what the Japanese scientific society have been done in the Arctic regions, rather than what the scientific contribution have been done. So it's rather a historical introduction about the activities of our society. The key institutions of the Arctic research in Japan are probably three majors and some others. The very first one, the actively working on the atmosphere and land regions, is National Institute of Polar Research. Whereas in the oceans, my institution, Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology, have been working very actively. And also we have space agencies, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. They are observing the Arctic regions from the space. And also from the academia, especially Hokkaido University, have been very active in the studies of the Arctic regions. And these scientists have created a Japan Consortium for Arctic Environmental Research. And nowadays, more than 386 members from 101 universities and institutions are making this consortium, and they are communicating to each other for the scientific accomplishment among them. And as a voice from all these 380 scientists is an invitation to Toyama in next year. The April 23rd to 30th, there will be Arctic Science Summit Week, and it is also a celebration of 25th year of IASC, etc., etc. Please visit Toyama. For more incentive, I would like to say Toyama is a very good place for the sushi and also nice Japanese rice wine. And also the tours of this meeting, you can visit 25 meters snow wall in the temperate regions. So if you are curious, please take flyers, which is located just outside of this room, and try to make a large mark in the end of the April next year for visiting this summit. The activities in the Arctic regions have started in 1950s, and there are many footprints of the activities. But the most interesting or most distinctive activities have been carried out recently from 2011. It is a program named Green Network of Excellence Program, and they have a special team, Green Arctic Climate Research Project. This project is focusing the studies about rapid change of the Arctic climate system and its global influence. Why Japanese scientists are working in Arctic is not only for understanding Arctic climate change, but also the change in the global scale, especially the influence of the climate around Japan. So there are 4 major themes. The first one is understanding mechanisms of warming amplification in the Arctic. The second is understanding of Arctic climate system for global climate and future change. The third one is evaluation of effects of the Arctic change on weather in Japan, marine ecosystem, and fisheries. And the fourth one is projection of sea ice distribution responding to availability of Arctic sea route. Based on this project, many field surveys have been carried out. More than 300 scientists from 35 institutions are participating in this project, and they left a lot of footprint in the Arctic regions, not only on the terrestrial, but also the coastal regions, forestry, as well as in the ocean. And based on the observational data, they are also doing some modeling project and prediction project too. From the space, Arctic sea route navigation support system is now under developing. And JAXA, University of Tokyo, is now making a special applications, tracking the satellite from satellite winter ice and forecasting the summer retreatment in the next year. The Arctic, although more than 300 scientists are working, still it's too few to cover all the Arctic regions, so we have an international collaboration too. Especially, one of the highlights is called Arctic Rose Campaign. Many terrestrial as well as the shipboard observation have been carried out in the international framework and try to see especially the great Arctic cyclones recently frequently happens in the regions. Not only on the oceans, the observation of the atmosphere have been carried out, especially carbon dioxide, methane, aerosol, and black carbons. The most interesting thing is a collaboration with the airlines. They agreed to have a measurement unit on their aircraft flying over the Russian Arctic regions, and we could collect a lot of information about these atmospheric informations through these collaboration with the Japan Airlines. Let me move a little bit more concentrate about the ocean research from now, because I'm an executive director for science of the ocean research institutions in Japan. So, again, the history of Japanese Arctic ocean research started in 1960s and 1970s, 80s. These research have been done rather individual level. And from 80s and early 90s, it was institutional level, but still the scale was very small and using the facility of other nations. So until mid-90s, the Japanese Arctic ocean research is rather at a baby level. But a new movement happens in 1990s. Our research vessel Mirai was launched in 1998. Our International Arctic Research Center have been opened in University of Alaska Fairbanks in 1999, and also the buoy developed in 1999. So all the new movement happens in the end of 1990s. The Mirai is a huge research vessel, the largest oceanographic research vessel except for the icebreakers. And they have an ice-resistant level 1, so they can cruise in the icy regions, but they cannot break, it cannot break the ice. But still, it's very useful for the Arctic research. And then in the 2000, JAMSTEC became an independent agency, and of course, the research object will have been a physical oceanography in the Arctic regions. But during this period, a big event happens, that the huge reduction of the Arctic ice. So a little bit different direction. Why such kind of the huge reduction of Arctic seas, ices, have been a major research theme in the middle of 2000. And the Mirai have been carried out lot of oceanographic observations in the Pacific side of the Arctic oceans, mooring observations as well as hydrographic survey, try to understand the inflow of the Pacific seawaters into the Arctic oceans. The buoy system have evolved rapidly in this period. The first one, JCAT, was started from 2000, and they have sent information via satellite. But from 2006, and a new one, POPS, Polar Ocean Profiling System, have been developed, and it has an Argo float below the surface mooring system. So it have measure the continuous profile of the seawater under the sea ice and send an information via satellite to the laboratory. This is a benchmark that the first Argo data have been sent from the Arctic Ocean by this POPs, and this is still very unique and legacy of our success in the Arctic Ocean research. But sometimes we fail that the buoys set in the ice have left from the ice and start flowing on the surface. And in 2002, the float have been arrived to the coast of the Iceland. It's stranded on the coast of Iceland. Here, Dr. Kikuchi have just rescued. It's on the newspapers in 2004. Anyway, so these are the past scientific research we have been done, and let me introduce the future. In the future, the Ministry of Education, Science, Technology, and Sports are now planning to start a new strategic promotion for Arctic research and analyze the strength and weakness of Japanese science and prioritize added value in addition to scientific merit. So the package of the key policies for Arctic research promotion is enhancement of international joint research and develop an underwater observation system in the Arctic Sea and underwater technology in the extreme environment. Also development of research center and researchers. And also observation and research by atmospheric radars. And we are trying to focus on Arctic ocean acidification, marine ecosystem change, and black carbon and methane. In this program, we want to use the cutting-edge technologies. For example, in the laboratories, we are trying to use the continuous transverse section image analyzers, which recently have shown that the shell strength of foraminifers, a plankton in the Arctic region, is significantly decreased. More than 40% decline in density of the shell, which is one of the first observations in the field on the impact of ocean acidification to the marine ecosystem. And we would like to continue this study more thoroughly. And we are planning to use big facilities, not only Mirai, but also we are now constructing a new research vessel, which is again ice class 1 resistancy, and it has cutting-edge technologies for the study of under deep seas. And also we are developing a new ROV which can work down to 10,000 meters, And so we are developing a autonomous underwater vehicles, which we hope to work beneath the sea ice and try to get observation of the regions. And using these technologies, we want to carry out the research not only for physical parameters, but also the biological parameters. From bacteria to fish. And also we are trying to utilize the big data science and try to understand the impact assessment. For example, due to the mining, due to the Arctic cruise ships, etc., etc. Thank you for your attention, and I'd like to say that I have a small number of brochures about the JAMSEC research, so if you can help me to make my luggage lighter, please contact me later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for introducing us to the impressive and wide range of activities within the scientific field. And thank you for yet another invitation. The last speaker before we turn to the panel is Mr. Tsunami, without the T. And he will blow you away with his presentation. Professor Tsunami is a professor from the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, and he is a PhD from Columbia University, United States, and his recent thesis is Japan's Science and Technology Diplomacy. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for the kind introduction. Mr. President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see, I have maybe 10 minutes, so that I'd like to make my presentation short, that my colleagues who flew all the way from Japan would have some time to answer your tough questions later. So, unlike the previous speaker, Dr. Shirayama, who's our leading marine biologist, I am sort of political economist by training, and comes from social science background. So I can say that that I'm the sort of a recent addition to our Arctic policy debate in Japan, and I'm a good example of how we are building up the network of researchers and academics who are interested in the Arctic issue in Japan. And I would like to, as a last speaker for this session, briefly touch upon two issues. One is sort of talk about a little bit about innovation, how Japan, which is my field, can contribute the Arctic debate through our innovation. And then like to introduce the Arctic in the Japanese diet, which is the recent sort of activities that is going on in our Japanese parliament. And let me briefly begin with the innovation issue. From this demystification through science to innovation in the North, as Dr. Shirayama has sort of mentioned some of these our recent achievements in the technology, that is AUV, Urashima, and also in our technology in deep ocean cruising. Also, we have a technology to ranging from the enforced infrastructure and buildings that are earthquake-free technology. So we have a quite wide range of innovation activities that we think would be helpful in solving problems in the Arctic. Recently, this year, we are very pleased to have the honor of the Nobel Prize winners that are in physics this year. And they are, as you know, the scientists who invented the efficient blue light emitting diodes. That really is a sort of an epitome of our technology in energy saving and technology. So these are the things that we think it's very important in putting forward in our contribution and innovation in the North. And Japan's technologies and innovations will continue to contribute to various issues surrounding the Arctic, in particular for sustainable development of indigenous population and life in a modern Arctic. Examples of innovation in efficient use of energy, smart grid, consumer electronic appliances, sustainable housing, infrastructure materials, and water resource and waste management are some of the examples of the technologies that we are pushing forward. We have also innovation on alternative energy, geothermal, mega solar project in Hokkaido, which is our northern part of the island, and innovation in resilience engineering, ICT, in infrastructure, both natural and human disaster management. One of the examples, of course, is the Alaskan oil pipeline, which is by the Japanese corporations, shows how earthquake-proof the technology that we can provide in providing infrastructure in the region as well. Briefly about the Japanese current policy to push for this innovation. Our Prime Minister has very strong leadership in this matter, called what he calls the Abenomics, which consists of the three components. One is, of course, the expansion of monetary policy. The second is aggressive fiscal stimulus package. And the third, which really concerns with the innovation itself, is the growth strategy. And here, we are working on how to stimulate innovation through science and technology. And this year, for a second version of growth strategy, we are putting forth the robotics revolution is one of the key areas. And here we can imagine how the robotics, our technology, can work in a very severe environment, such as in the Arctic and in the very near future. And also ICT, agriculture, and resilience infrastructure. So these are some of the examples that we're putting forward at the moment. I'm also participating in this growth strategy section, and then we're working on the kind of realization of clean and economic energy system as well. Let me go through this. Our ambassador mentioned a recent sort of event on Innovation for Cool Earth Forum, which our government has invited the world-leading scientists and policymakers to address the climate change through innovation. And this would go on from now for every year, be hosted by our government, and will be one of the major events that we're hosting in coming years. And here is a good example in my field, that is the technology push to actually move towards more demand pull innovation, which is a very effective tool to bring about the technologies that to solve the environmental problems and diffusion of those technologies to solve those problems. And one of the ideas is, of course, to using High North as a test bed for the new technological innovation, which we go through with the open innovation and facilitate more international collaboration in this area. And of course, the good example of the Iceland-Japan collaboration is on geothermal technology, which we provide most of the geothermal turbine technologies, including Iceland. And so what we consider the Japan's innovation above the ground, and Iceland's, of course, leading technology in the under the ground, which is to search the ground, and of course has the drilling technology and whatnot. So these are the very good combination that we can push forward, and it's a good example of open innovation in solving the some of the energy problems in the Arctic area. So, and then I'd like to briefly mention some of the recent activities in our Japanese Diet. The Japanese Diet is our parliament, and some of the recent interest by our Japanese members of parliament led to the creation of the Parliamentary League for Arctic Frontier. We did have several parliamentary leagues that specializes on something like Japan's strategy for maritime nation, and which sort of touches better about the Arctic. But for the first time, this parliamentary league is established just to deal with the Arctic issue. And the purpose, of course, is to initiate policy discussions on the Arctic in the Diet, and support Japan's contribution in the Arctic from the parliamentary activities. And some of the recent activities that they have done is resolution of the League is formulation of the national policy on Arctic and proper allocation of government resources for the Arctic-related activities. And the other is the recently being admitted to the Arctic Council on the Arctic under the World Economic Forum. One of the leaders in this parliamentary league is recently appointed the Minister of Justice, Minister Kamikawa, to this group. And so they're very active now and have very special high interest in the Arctic debate in our Diet in recent years. And this is some of the things that this parliamentary league has called for immediate action. That is the formulation of comprehensive national policy on the Arctic, establishment of the cabinet-level meetings on the Arctic and inter-ministerial meeting at the Director General level, and creating a platform for comprehensive policy on the Arctic, including business leaders. Pushing for a better mechanism for science, informing both policy leaders and general public within Japan, as well as the world actors. Increase Japan's participation in international conferences such as this one, and workshops on the Arctic, and securing allocation of government resources that is very important for the Arctic activities. So these are one of those things that our parliament is pushing for. And GRIPS is my host university. It's a National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies. We are helping these activities by policy makers by creating a kind of a workshop task force supporting Japan's Arctic policy by bringing together policymakers and academics, both natural and social sciences. And GRIPS is we're like the Kennedy School of the Harvard University in the United States. We are a policy school, so we are kind of acting as a think tank as well as educating for the policymakers. And so we organize this sort of workshop because there's a need to formulate Japan's comprehensive policy on the Arctic. So these are one of the recent activities that we are putting forward. So let me, I think if I realize, well, if I remember, that yesterday's Great Britain's session showed that the number of maybe 5, 6 members of parliament that came here to present their activities. And if I mention that when I go back to Japan to these parliamentary league members, they'll be very delighted that they're going to be really wanting to come to the conference maybe next year to be part of the, especially when I tell them that Great Britain has won the superpower status by bringing all these politicians. I'm sure that they'll be very eager to book their flights right away and try to come to the conference next year. So Mr. President, I think will be able to contribute in this matter as well. So let me conclude my presentation here. And thank you very much for your attention. And I guess we all wanted to see you, Japan, in Toyama in 2015. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But you don't escape for questions and comments, even though you're trying to use up all your time by your presentations. We have in the panel now, first of all, Her Excellency new ambassador to Iceland, Ambassador Shino. Welcome. And next to Mrs. Ambassador, we have Mr. Inomoto, Professor and Deputy Director of the National Institute of Polar Research. And finally, we have Mr. Kikuchi, who is the team leader of Arctic Ocean Climate System Research Team, Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology. So this is a panel. You can ask any question you want. I have prepared the panel that you will be asking very difficult questions. So please, if you have any questions or comments, approach the microphone. Yes, Mr.
Yeah, Theo Kongsberg, residents of Northern Iceland. Yeah, we are in Iceland. Sometimes we tend to forget it, but we are in fact in Iceland. And this is especially to the last speaker, talking about policies. It's very good with policies, and the notion of Arctic in the diet, I like very much. Members of diet, perhaps, let's take citizens of diet instead to take it from there. But okay, let's be really practical on fishing. So why don't you import some fresh Icelandic fish? Or Northern Norway fish? That would be not policy, but practical politics. So that's a proposal, and probably so no one in the panel is able to do it. I don't know.
Well, as ambassador to the bilateral relationship, I welcome your suggestion, and we do buy your fresh fish. Thank you.
And Greenland is selling fish to Japan. Don't take over. Yes, please, next.
My name is ICELAND-JAPAN. I'm at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Germany. My question is that in all of this, we are looking at innovation, and there's remarkable technology and development, but we also have the challenge of the social innovation. And my question to all of you, if you will, whoever would like to respond, is what do you see as the mechanisms to bring the kind of interdisciplinary and, if you will, transdisciplinary, that is stakeholder-based research into this process, coupled with the technology innovation?
Thank you very much for that very important question. As I mentioned, that we are recently trying to put together a community of scientists and researchers, both from natural sciences and social sciences. And I think Dr. Shirayama mentioned about the 300 group of scholars and researchers who are now put together a kind of a book on whatever the researches that they're doing. And you're right, I think it's a challenge for any of us who has to have a dialogue between those develop technology and those that do the social science work. But I think one of the strengths of my observation of our community is scientific community is that they are willing to go out there in the field. And they work very hard in the Arctic regions. Thank you, I mean, thanks to your hosting our scientist activities in your Arctic region. But both social scientists as well as natural scientists, they can work in the field, and that's where they can build a good community in it. And I hope there is good social innovation, which is very important to come. But I think the field, having access to the field is very important.
Thank you. And the next question or comment?
My name is Ella Anagik. I'm actually from Anchorage, Alaska. And I did notice that one of the professors there had mentioned the increased acidity in the oceans. I was just wondering how much research Japan has done, not only with respect to the causes, but the rate of increase of this acidity. The reason that I'm raising this is because of the fact that in Alaska, we've noticed a remarkable decline in our king salmon stock. So I was wondering if there is a correlation between the increased acidity of the oceans and the rate and the loss of our salmon.
Well, thank you for the questions. That is a big question because most of the information we have been done in the experiment in the laboratory about the impact of ocean acidification to the organisms. And I've just shown the impact to the foraminifers, small zooplanktons, which was observed in the field. That is a very rare case so far. So there are many information from laboratories, but we need the field observations to understand the consequence of the ocean acidification impact to the total ecosystems. That is on the way, and I cannot answer precisely right now. Please look forward to the coming scientific output in near future. Thank you very much.
I can see people lining up behind the microphones, but we have a very, very tight schedule, so I will only allow 2 more questions, sorry. But I'm sure that the panel will be more than willing to talk with you afterwards, somewhere in this building. Yeah. So, 1 question over here.
Yes, my name is Aki Tonami. I am researcher at the University of Copenhagen. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is actually 2, but they're related, so I'll keep it really short. You mentioned interdisciplinary research on the Arctic, and I would like to know how you have integrated the research on Ainu people, who are the northern indigenous people in Japan, into the Arctic research. And secondly, I am located in Copenhagen, and we receive delegation from other East Asian countries such as China and South Korea, and particularly people in Denmark or in Greenland. They would like to know how Japan differs and how Japan excels compared to other East Asian countries such as South Korea and Japan, which are also they boast science, research, and innovation. So if you put it in a really short sentence, what is Japan's strength?
The first question, the involvement of the Ainu people's concern is we are not especially working with the Ainu people problem, but as Professor Tsunami introduced, we are from natural science to social science. We are bridging those activities, and now we are inviting more human scientists. And in the coming period, we expect more relationship with not only Ainu people, but many northern peoples together.
Okay, I would like to talk about the collaboration among the Far Eastern Asian countries. Truly speaking, before coming here, I was in Seattle to join the meeting with NOAA, Canadian, Russian, China, Japan, Korea, and that's named the Pacific Arctic Group. And they have a common perspective, Pacific aspects of Arctic Ocean research. So using such kind of collaboration formula, we encourage our collaboration for the Arctic Ocean research. Is it okay?
Thank you. And over here.
Dear dignitaries, thank you very much for your performance on the high stage. In the context of the utilization and value creation from renewable resources in the Arctic bioeconomy. I would like to ask Mr. Suginama about the plan, the really ambitious plan of opening centers on research and education in each of the Arctic states. How long time frame do you have for that ambitious plan? Excuse me, my name is Arnljótur Bjarki Bergsson and I'm at Matís in Iceland. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. Actually, that is the planning phase and not approved for the budget yet. So I cannot tell nothing right now, but our ministry is negotiating very hard to the funding ministries. So please look forward to the outcome for that one, probably in the end of this year.
Thank you very much, and sorry, Lasse, I'm trying to be very democratic, but it feels like we have to close the session before someone physically removes me from the stage. There is a big watch blinking, which you can see from the stage only. It's very stressing. But thank you very much to the panel and the presenters and to Japan. I'm sure that the audience have a lot of other questions and comments, which I hope that you will facilitate. On a personal note, we in Greenland know of the Japanese endurance. The only person actually who has crossed the Greenland inland ice from north to south was a Japanese. Normally they will go from east to west. That's a much shorter distance. But this man, he did it alone, and he was from Japan. Thank you very much.